Let's find common ground. I'm your host, Florian Glatz. Welcome to the podcast. Today, I'm with Juan, a facilitator at MakerDAO, and we're going to learn all about what that actually means. Hi, Juan. Good to have you here.
Hey, Florian. Thank you for having. I don't want to keep your expectations too high about learning everything about it, but I'll try to do my best for sure.
Well, let's start with a simple introduction. Tell us who you are in your own words.
So I'm Juan. I'm one of the facilitators at MakerDAO, which for some people is arguably one of the few DAOs out there, mainly in terms of scale, terms of product market fit. So there is a business model that works. So in that sense, we do get a lot more drama than most DAOs. So yeah, I'm one of the facilitators there, which title-wise is not very descriptive, I guess, but it basically means that I'm the interaction between a team and governance to get stuff done. And then going back more to what I do is I would say that's governance design, which means try to make things work and try to test experiments to make things better with better and worse results.
Interesting. Before we dive into MakerDAO, I have a lot of questions on that. In fact, I want to learn a little bit about your journey into Web3. You've obviously done things before, like all of us. How did your journey lead you to, well, really one of the most interesting, probably, and most successful true Web3 organisms? How did that come about?
So I was always very curious about different things. Yeah, when I was a kid, I used to participate in Model UN simulations. So at some point I wanted to be a diplomat. Then I really liked computers, so I wanted to become like a software engineer. Then I studied finance and IT. So that's a bit my educational background. And then, I'm quite risk averse in general. So First, I worked in consulting companies because I was told that was the way to jumpstart your career and be able to do anything. Then I went more into the startup world. So I started working in relatively big startups, so more like scale-ups, helping them scale and learning a lot, doing sales operations, product management, project management. Learned a lot there. I highly recommend the experience. And finally, I discovered Web3. Actually, my cousin told me like, hey, I'm going to ETH Berlin. I'm going to be a volunteer. Do you want to come? I'm like, what's ETH? He's like, oh, it's an Ethereum conference. What's Ethereum? It's like Bitcoin, but with smart contracts. I'm like, let's go. It's free pizza. What can be bad about it? And I found some guy. I don't know who he is, but I would love to thank him at some point. But basically, he told me, "What do you do?" I'm like, "I have nothing to do with you guys." He's like, "Well, if you're in fintech, you should definitely check DeFi." And he added me into some Telegram group, and that was it. That was the beginning of my rabbit hole. I started reading, going crazy about this project, and making sure that software was on the blockchain for everyone to inspect, that it was composable, that anyone had access, that it couldn't be stopped. So I, in a way, finishing in a DAO and looking back, it's almost like a nice conclusion of all my career, including the Model UN and the politics behind the DAO. So that's my story. I guess you'll have to cut it a lot because it's not that interesting for the amount of time that it took me to say it.
Quite the opposite. I think it's interesting, and your conclusion, I can only agree with it also from my own biography, which is that this crypto, Web3, blockchain, whatever you want to call it, it brings together so many different fields into one package. You just don't work on one single thing. You have politics, you have governance, you have economics, finance. How the internet works at its core. All these things come together in an incredible package. So that's always been the thing that fascinates me as well. So I can relate a lot to this.
Absolutely.
Well, judging from your own story, but also from, I think, your, elevated vantage point at which you now stand within MakerDAO, one of these amazing and successful organizations in Web3. What is your best guess at the moment how Web3 will reach mass adoption, if ever? Or do you think that's not where Web3 is headed? What is your best guess?
I'm not sure. I feel that if we do reach that point, so let me backtrack a bit before we get there. But I think that right now we are at the skeuomorphic phase of Web3, meaning that we're just copying everything we see on Web2, and we still haven't gotten why this is important. I believe, and hopefully I'm right, but with the ZK proofs and this new wave of anything that has to do with proving something without revealing the whole part, I believe that we are actually going to see a lot of very interesting use cases that can be leveraged to actually start finding these things that are much different from anything older, and where we can actually start to imagine a different world. And to answer your question, are we going to reach mass adoption? I believe we are if we find or if this is an answer to everything that we see, that it's maybe not everything, but if this is an answer to things that are wrong with our world. So the moment that we can build something that's better, I believe that's when we will reach mass adoption, and then we can, I don't know, play with the definition of what mass adoption means. But I don't think that we're that far in that sense. But I think that the ZK proofs are or the next logical step, at least for me. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see.
You said a bunch of interesting things. I like this description of the skeuomorphic phase of Web3. That's an interesting one. I'll get back to that when we talk about MakerDAO and whether MakerDAO is a skeuomorphic product actually, or if it's something else. But also for the audience who might be, not only following Web3, but also what's currently happening in AI, where we could say AI is sort of at an inflection point at the moment. Do you think that ZK proofs will be relevant to make AI more trustworthy, or, keep society functioning with something like ZK proof technology? Or do you see these fields completely disconnected now and in the future?
Yeah, so originally I was thinking about ZK mainly to respect the privacy and to make sure that you can potentially have almost like divergent or diverse, almost like personalities. So you can be one person with this group because you find them extremely interesting, and with this other group you can have maybe not a different set of views, but like a subset that might not be or fully compatible with the first group. So in that sense, I do think that the ZK might bring us to that. But then with the advent of AI and all these deep fakes, we will eventually trust more a digital signature than a video or a text or anything that's not in real life communication, and maybe that can be deep faked too in the near future. So potentially it will be a very different world in that sense. I'm not sure how it's going to look like, Florian. I'm not that good of a visionary, unfortunately.
Well, the world needs more, not as many visionaries as it needs people who are good at execution. So that speaks for you. Okay, let's talk a little bit about MakerDAO, because we've been teasing it all the time. I assume most people listening to this podcast are familiar with it, but for those who don't, can you summarize in a few sentences what MakerDAO is? Sort of an Eli 5. Explain it like I'm 5 years old.
The Eli 5 version is that MakerDAO is a bit like a pawn shop where you can create a loan to yourself. So the most basic and the initial example was, let's say you have a bunch of ETH that you do not want to sell, but you want to buy a car, for example. You would take the ETH, put it in a vault, lock it there, and you would mint DAI, which is a stable coin pegged to the US dollar. Well, we can get into that, but the loan would be over collateralized, meaning that you would need to put more ETH than the value that you're getting a loan for. And once you do that, you can use that DAI and you repay it whenever you want. Of course, there's something which is very similar to the interest rate, which is called the stability fee. But that's pretty much it. So for anyone, and I've known a few people that said, "Oh, I sold ETH to buy a house in 2018, and that's like, okay, that was a very expensive house when you look at it, because the price of it, I don't know, 10x or whatever. So potentially, I don't know, if the house was 100K, you would have had 1 million in it right now. With Maker, you could have borrowed 100K in DAI and paid it back, plus a stability fee, and it would have been much cheaper. And then in terms of use cases, there are a lot, right? Like the most popular one up to now was leverage. So you deposit ETH, and with the DAI you buy more ETH, and then you deposit it again, and you repeat the cycle until you reach the maximum that you can borrow. But now we're seeing other use cases as well, especially with real world assets. And anyone doing like kind of like basic finance will know of this like invoice factoring, where you sell future invoices because you need the money before, to keep, I don't know, your operations or to increase production, etc. So potentially that's a use case that Maker has been working on for a while, and it's being developed as we speak.
What do you think? Because I find your pawn shop example very interesting. I haven't heard it before. What is the more relevant aspect of this system? Is it the ability to pawn things and get some, money-like asset out, or is it the money-like asset itself? Because I can say for myself, I'm mostly using DAI, when I need to do some transactions, but I rarely pawn things myself. So I'm just using one end of the whole system.
Yes.
Which one of these two is actually the more relevant today and going forward?
Going forward, what or the vision, and again, it's not for everyone, because the fact that it's a DAO means that not everyone shares the same vision, and there's a lot to work on that, and we can discuss about governance later. But there's this idea that DAI could become the world currency to make the world a better place. Right now, every time you hold euros, for example, you are financing the debt of the European Central Bank, which could be doing a lot of stuff like, I don't know, wars or whatever that goes against your principles. Same thing with the dollar, same thing with every currency from a national state. So potentially even holding that currency, it's helping them finance something that you might not be for. So if DAI can only, and this is again like the vision, long-term future, we're not even remotely close to it, but if we can only mint DAI from projects that are making the world a better place, then that would mean that by people accepting DAI, they would be forcing these projects to become more relevant. So you would be making it cheaper for these projects to be able to borrow. So by using this currency, you'll be actually helping the world to be shaped in something that's more like to your vision. And yeah, arguably the currency is, I don't know if the or the second most important tool that humans have for coordination. I think that the first one might be like the storytelling or any type of stories that we tell each other. But currency is the second most important potentially. So if we can fix the money, potentially we will be able to fix the world much, much faster.
That's beautiful. In terms of values, what does Maker stand for? I know that Rune, the founder of this project, has shared a vision that relates to the ecosystem, nature, green revolution, those sorts of things. Is this what Maker essentially stands for? Is it even possible? You mentioned it's a DAO. People have diverging visions. Is there some sort of unified, overarching system of values that Maker stands for from your point of view?
It's hard. You can ask different people and get different versions. I think that the one we can almost all agree on is the resiliency part. So it's making sure that DAI can survive different types of shock, and there's this, we can get into like the scopes or the frameworks that we have been trying to implement from the governance design point of view, but this is not easy at all. You need to consider the craziest situations and make sure that you are prepared if any of those happens. So right now DAI is pegged to the US dollar, mainly because the US dollar is a bit like the de facto world currency. So everyone around the world knows how much a dollar is worth. as an extreme situation, if this was not the case anymore, and for some reason the US dollar lost its hegemony, then we would need to potentially peg DAI to something again that the whole world understands what that unit is. So that's a situation that if you discuss it openly might sound crazy or super far-fetched to write down. People might start raising alarms like, oh, they want to depeg DAI. That's crazy. But when you're thinking about resiliency, you need to think about all these long-tail risks and how to be able to do that. And then I think that resiliency is not only for the protocol. There's this beautiful image that says, yeah, we did destroy the world, but for a very short moment, we created a lot of value for the shareholders. So that goes with the resiliency. It's not just resiliency for the project; it's resiliency for the world that's using the project to coordinate. So if we're using this currency to coordinate as humans, then we need to also make sure that we are resilient as a species. So again, I don't think that a lot of people will articulate that in that way, but I think that's a bit what we're aiming at.
Let's go back to the basics. What makes a DAO a DAO, and in how much does the DAO aspect of this project contribute to this fundamental goal of resiliency?
So DAO, it's hard to define, even not only for beginners but also for more, let's say, advanced people. People don't seem to agree on what a DAO is, and the reason is that decentralization is not binary; it's more like a spectrum. So there are different layers where you could be more or less decentralized with different trade-offs. So yeah, what is a DAO? It's by definition only it's like the decentralized autonomous organization. Organization is relatively easy, which is just a bunch of people, and that could be as small as 2, I guess, and as big as the whole world, maybe, if we ever manage that scale. Then autonomous is the part that everyone seems to struggle with, and then the decentralized is where everyone is fighting. So autonomous, we almost forget usually. Organization we take for granted, and decentralized we fight on Twitter space or crypto Twitter, I guess. Yeah, we fight on crypto Twitter. I don't know if you want me to be more specific about the answer.
I know, but I would repeat my follow-up question, which is how does this construct of decentralized, autonomous, and somehow also an organization contribute to this goal of resiliency? How are these two things actually connected in your mind?
Yeah. So a DAO, being decentralized by definition, contributes to resiliency because you do not have a single point of failure. So when I was mentioning that there are different layers of decentralization, you can go as crazy as you want in thinking of all the risks and all the points where you could attack whatever system you're designing and think about its resiliency. So I already gave the example of the US dollar depegging, well, not depegging, but losing its central spot in the world. Another one could be, what if Ethereum stops being the leading blockchain? So someone could say, okay, we should explore the other blockchains and see where we can go. The other one could be like, okay, what if I don't know, this group of people of I don't know, developers, let's say, they're the only ones that understand the full code, so they could take hostage the whole thing. So then it's like, okay, how do we solve for that? So you need to take different steps in every different layer that you can think of. So like, in order to be able to create this resiliency. So the decentralization helps because ideally decentralization means that not one single point of failure is found, and any kind of like cluster can be spun up fast enough to make sure that the system doesn't die with the one failure.
Would you say that MakerDAO is a typical DAO? There are, according to some statistics, I think on DeepDAO, which is like an industry website, around 10 to 15,000 DAOs DAOs in the world. Would you say Maker is one of many, or is Maker in some ways special or unique? How would you compare?
One of the DAOs that I like to mention for people that don't or that still are getting into DAOs is Alcoholic Anonymous. So you have this set of rules, and everyone can spin up their own chapter. So in that sense, it's quite a decentralized and autonomous organization, because if you read the rules and you want to start a chapter, you can do it in your own city, and you can start helping people like in a very autonomous way, almost without asking for permission. Then there are different ways of registering your chapter so that people can find you and stuff like that. But that's the idea of that is not to control or to direct, but it's more like, hey, if you want to do it, go ahead. They even encourage you to do it, like to customize it for the local target that you're going to, or that you're trying to help. There's this other crazy company that I learned not so long ago. It's called Mondragon in the Basque country. And it's like a federation of cooperatives. And they have their own bank. They have these videos. So if anyone wants to start a cooperative, it's like, form your group, bring the business plan. We'll coach you on how to do this. If it makes sense for us, we'll give you the financing. And bam, you're part of the group. I think that as of 2019, I might be wrong, but I think they had revenues of 12 billion, or it was some crazy number. We were like, wow, okay, so that's scale, right? And then to go back to your question, Maker, in that sense, we do have the scale of several billion dollars. In revenues, we have a lot less. And then the different part is that everything is on the blockchain. Maybe not everything, but the source of truth is the blockchain. It's a lot more open, I think, than other DAOs, and we are running a lot of experiments. So in that sense, I think that the industry might be looking at Maker for kind of like for guidance and to see how these experiments are going, for better and worse, right? Like we have seen in the past organizations or other DAOs approaching us and be like, oh, we want to copy this, and it's like, please don't. We already failed once. We don't want you to follow that same path. Try something else. So in that sense, I think that Maker has that advantage, is that it has the size, it has the product market fit. So we attract all the drama. For better or worse, we are learning a lot, and hopefully sharing that with the rest of the world.
I would agree that Maker is a true industry leader, and that certainly differentiates you, I think, from most other DAOs. When anyone who's been watching the DAO space over the past few years, I think, has seen a massive increase in popularity of the concept. Many people started to experiment recently with this concept. Famous was maybe about a year ago or a year and a half, Constitution DAO, that was trying to buy a copy of the US Constitution, for example. Now there is a DAO that recently bought a golf course, I think, Link DAO, I think they're called. So a lot of experimentation. But when we look at these big original DAOs, maybe even Bitcoin included, which some people say was the first DAO ever created, do you think that DAOs are fundamentally tied to this notion of public goods? Is this what a DAO is for, to coordinate a public good, a digital public good? Or could DAOs also be useful in completely different areas? Some people talk about service DAOs and other sorts of kinds of DAOs. Is this a very broadly applicable concept to organize and coordinate people? Or would you say, oh my God, it's such a headache. If you don't absolutely need it, don't do it. Use something else. What's your take on this?
Yes, a lot of things to unpack from what you said. I don't know if it has to be digital only. I'm actually quite looking forward to, I don't know how to call them, but DAOs as a group of people organizing in a way, and having the blockchain to actually help them, so they don't have to trust like some central point of failure. I think we've seen it in several countries where the currency goes crazy and there are different things. Then you have like provinces that start minting their own kind of like debt instruments. Then some like local communities take it a step forward and they kind of like mint their own. And because they are like a closed community, it's easier to trust each other and the value of the of said currency. But maybe with the blockchain, you can take it a step forward and you can actually make it better for everyone. You can start playing with the incentives, make sure that the whole community is benefiting from it. So yeah, I don't know if it's only for the digital things. And then I'm not sure if it has to be a public good. Certainly, we do think that DAI should be a public good in that sense. So it should serve the higher purpose and to be able to be the universal currency that's making the whole world a better place. Because I think because of that definition of the world being a better place, we might struggle to define what a better world is. But I don't know if I would discount smaller DAOs that want to do something small and crazy. I think that giving this power back to the people might actually create a lot of really cool things that we haven't seen yet. I don't know. It could be some theater DAO producing plays or content, or eventually if you have a lot of people that are really into it, you can get this. You can get crazy things that we haven't seen yet because of the blockchain. I don't think we have seen a lot yet. There's a lot of I don't know, call them rug pulls, call them whatever. But I do think that there's this opportunity to create crazy stuff that we haven't seen yet, and I'm super excited to see what more creative people can come up with.
Going back to this concept of decentralization, obviously, in the end, it's people working together who make a DAO happen. Of course, there is this element of autonomy, which means that the blockchain is involved as an immutable ledger. There is this this concept of smart contracts who sort of execute trustlessly a certain protocol logic that benefits from this immutability of the underlying blockchain and all these things. But in the end, it's always people who have to sort of enact these protocols and use them and maintain them and develop them further. And I want to sort of talk about two elements here. Maybe the first one, Bitcoin is famous for not really having a founder. I mean, it has this mythical figure of Satoshi Nakamoto, but whoever that is, if it was an individual or a group of people, we'll probably never know. And they decided to disappear quite early in the project. And since then, Bitcoin has been running without a leader. That's also why Bitcoin maximalists, as they are being called, often criticize something like Ethereum for being, I don't know, I don't want to name the names that they call it, but they basically criticize that it seems very much centralized around a small group of people. Of course, in particular, Vitalik, who's sort of the intellectual creator of the protocol, of the blockchain. Maker also has a founder that is famous in some circles. My mom probably hasn't heard of Rune, but I certainly know him and many other people in the space. Do you think that makes a project less decentralized if it has this mythical founder sort of pulling things along? And do you think MakerDAO is at a point where key figures in the DAO today could step down or disappear completely and it would continue to run? Or is that just something that will come later in the life of the project?
Again, there are trade-offs. I think that there's this beauty on the immutability of Bitcoin and the fact that people will fight to death to not ever change it or almost make any type of improvements, because that comes with trade-offs. So you don't want to compromise on security, etc. And there's this beauty to it for sure. Something that something that people are working to solve, or that I would like to see people to work to solve, is the problem of reputation. Maybe the ZK proofs will help a lot with that, but I don't think we are even remotely close to to solving reputation issues. And going back to your question about founders and some kind of like visionary that brings kind of some kind of direction. When you, as humans, we cannot like intellectually and possibly comprehend everything that we interact with. Meaning that, and this is why we're coordinating, right? It's because this allows people to hyper specialize in things. And when you fly on a plane, that means that not only there's a crazy guy that spent years learning how to pilot the plane, but there's another crazy guy that spent years creating, I don't know, assembling computers, to another guy that spent years improving microchips and microprocessors. And you have all this hyper specialization of crazy people that are pushing that specific hyper niche forward and improving technology. And that's why sometimes you do need these reputational figures to be able to know if a change is needed. So we do have the possibility of forks. We have seen it with Bitcoin Cash and Ethereum Classic, but for some reason both original projects kind of like stayed being the more popular ones. I don't know what would happen if Vitalik tomorrow said like, guys, let's start again. Let's reset this whole Ethereum thing. We need something that's privacy native. Maybe, I don't know, it would be at least interesting, but maybe some people would follow and be like, yeah, he's right. And you have like the maximalists will like follow him blindly. Probably the haters will be like, yeah, of course, centralized, whatever. But I do think that it's important to solve the reputation problem before we actually start attacking on different things, because it's impossible for any human being to comprehend every single aspect. So when you feel that someone is trying to do good, and when they have the capacity and they have dedicated their lives to it, then you kind of trust them and you follow and you choose to participate in the project instead of just questioning everything. Hopefully that was clear.
Yeah, that was I think pretty good. Now we've talked about the decentralization part a lot. I'm not going to go too much into the autonomy part. It seems to be partially quite technical and then partially quite undefined. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the organization aspect of the MakerDAO. As an organization, what do you believe are the key challenges today of MakerDAO? Is everything, under control and running smoothly, and it's clear how this organization is functioning and developing? Or is it somewhere on the spectrum of, okay, this is just crazy new territory, it's actually hard to make it work, there are outside influences that make it possibly even harder? How do you look at this organization aspect of MakerDAO, and what do you see as the key challenges?
For years, when the Maker Foundation dissolved and kind of like handed everything over to the DAO, that was, I guess that was roughly in a bull market. So people or degens were leveraging a lot and were using Maker a lot, which meant that the fees were decent and the expenses were not that high. As we tried to scale Maker, we found that it was hard for MKR holders, which are the owners of the protocol, to give direction on the things they wanted. So things were extremely nuclear, meaning that it was either I defund this whole team and they all should leave, or I have almost no control on the things that they should be doing. As an example, let's say you have you hire a marketing team and you give them a budget, and then they decide to burn everything in a stadium or Super Bowl ad or something. You cannot tell them like, hey, we don't want you to do this, keep working on something else. You need to be like, hey, you're really, really, really bad. You should almost never work for us again. So the tensions or the tools are not there to allow for communication and to provide guidance. And I think that the main reason of that is because we centered compensation around teams. So we would say like, hey, if you want to do marketing, here's your budget, compared to work. So whenever you say, hey, we would like someone to do this, you're kind of like funding the projects and funding the exact direction that you want to take. So that was at the what we call core units, which is a bit like small companies, I guess, or different departments working for the DAO. And then the other challenge that we found is that the delegates were very, very loosely defined, and that was by design. At the beginning, where we wanted to see what the market would do with this new position. So we said, okay, if you want to be a recognized delegate, here's a pay. It was I believe that it changed, but for a long time it was 144K per year, which is decent, I guess, or it's very good in some areas, and some others might be less. But then it was, because it was not very clearly defined what the role was, what the challenges were, how they should provide like some kind of strategy, or if they should at all, if they should challenge budgets or not. We got like a very strange mix of different flavors, but at the end of the day, they were all very, very similar. So whatever the first one did was assumed that was the norm. So everyone just kept pushing for the same thing, to the point where you could potentially have a contest with which delegate said this, and it would be a very, very hard game to play, because they almost all sound the same. So yeah, that was the second main challenge that we had. And that's why right now there's this huge organizational change called Endgame, which is making everything much more explicit instead of letting the market bring you the best. So it's being more specific about what you want, about the requirements, and that's a bit the challenge we're trying to solve. I don't know if I should go more in detail in Maker or Endgame, or
maybe later.
I don't want to be a radio, Florian. That's it.
What I'd like to understand is what you just mentioned, these changes that you've decided to do. You've seen that in the original conception of the Maker organization, you've basically had teams, and they got a budget and they could do whatever. You had delegates, sort of didn't really have a clearly defined agenda of what they should be doing. And it led to some level of dysfunction in the organization. You've then decided to do a reorganization of it all. You call it the end game. What I'm trying to understand is, where is this organizational knowledge embedded? Is this pure culture? Is this a smart contract on the blockchain? Is this some middle management that is managing the Maker organization? Or how, for someone who comes from a traditional organization, how could you explain where these processes are defined, where the knowledge is kept? How does Maker do this as an organization? I don't know if I'm good at phrasing this question.
You mean in the new, like in Endgame, in the new paradigm, or in the old one?
I would say in both. How was it before, and how are you doing it under the new paradigm? How do you imagine it could work in the new paradigm?
So that's part of the workforce challenge or issue that you're mentioning. It's that if you're running a team and you're getting compensation, it is almost in your best interest to not share everything that you know. So potentially can make the protocol hostage to any of your requests. So in that sense, we did see the rise of the bureaucrats, a lot of people middle managing processes that almost should not, or that they should be either automatic or should be more open. And we did see a lot of pushbacks and politicking instead of creating frameworks and being able to discuss, let's say, the recipes instead of the end result. So yeah, for example, you could propose in the old paradigm. Let's say you propose this new project because you think it's good for Maker. Someone could come and be like, but Florian is also an investor of this other project, and they had coffee 3 months ago, so that means that he's biased. And then someone else would be like, yeah, but this is what we really need, and then we're cutting costs, and the conversation was a mess. Like there was no direction, no no facilitation, and it was extremely hard to the point where you do not know if this is intentional or not, or if it's just people trying to help, or if it's just people trying to create noise to boycott new things. If a new project came and said, "Hey, we want to do, I don't know, coffee farm lending in Latin America. We already have a business model working. Can you please give us a credit line of, I don't know, 5 million?" In the old paradigm, it would be like, "Oh, you guys are too small." Then a lot of criticism, like, "Oh, is this I don't know, recession resistant?" Again, a lot of conversations that might not make a lot of sense out of context. So the other thing that, or one of the things that we are trying to define in Endgame is these 12 different scopes, which are tasked with creating frameworks. So every single thing has to be a framework. If you want to allow something, it has to be a framework. If you want to ban something, it has to be a framework. That way you're making sure that it's fair for everyone and that you actually have an open framework that everyone can criticize and improve and bring ideas to. So if you say this project is too small, we should not do it, then okay, what's the normal size, or when do you start doing it? If you say this is too risky because it's in Latin America, it's like, okay, which regions should we ban? Is everyone agreeing with that? Yes or no? So if you make everything a framework, instead of discussing the project that you are an investor in or not, you're discussing which type of things should we give credit to, or should we fund or not. So I think that the conversation is, or at least that's what we're hoping, is that the conversation will be much richer in that sense.
Interesting approach. Makes a lot of sense from the first glimpse. Now, you've been working with Maker, for Maker, for a number of years already. You're quite deep in this transition we just talked about, this end game, this reorganization. What would you say to someone who's interested in potentially working for DAOs? What are the pros and the cons of working for a DAO? What's great about it, and what might be not so great about working for a DAO?
I think that DAOs are perfect for entrepreneurs that want to make a difference and that they have a really, really high degree of autonomy. If you're waiting for someone to tell you what to do, you're potentially going to be in a bad spot. So that's a bit the people I've seen thriving the most are people that are just creating MVPs almost every other day. It's like, hey, I did this. Does it work or not? Should I keep working on this or not? It's much harder to get yourself hired in that sense. So no one will guarantee you a long-term contract, more or less. So you need to be sure that you are providing value very, very often. But people that do and that they like that environment, they thrive because they're just producing value enormously and they're just delivering all the time. I'm not saying that's how DAOs work. So you do find people that are like, oh, I'm comfortable where I am. I'm just defending my turf, so stay away. That's basically one of the things that we are trying to change. But potentially, if you find the people that want to get stuff done, you are able to thrive in those environments.
That's a good answer. What are the typical roles that DAOs need in order to thrive? You call yourself a facilitator, which is quite a mysterious job title. I've seen other mysterious job titles in DAOs. What is this about? What are the typical roles that DAOs are sort of building themselves around, and what do they do? What's maybe also different about them compared to, someone who also only knows the more traditional corporate environment? What's unique there?
It's funny that you mention titles, because I think that might be another big. I don't know if it's a red flag, but it's another thing that might help you identify people that might be good or not. So in an environment where things change so quickly and so fast, and you do every single thing that there is to do, or you try to provide value in different ways, rapidly changing. A title becomes much less important. So if anyone's out there trying to solve the reputation problem, think about that, please. I'm not sure how. then yeah, when I'm trying to recruit and almost try to convince people to join any DAO, like I got that as feedback, being like, hey, you need to be more clear on what the position is. But yeah, the truth is that, and we do have a couple of good poster examples where someone starts as an intern, they are killing it. 3 months later, it's like, okay, man, just take this. And a year later, they're like running a whole department almost. What's their job title? It's still the intern. Like no one cared to change that. Hopefully, and this is for anyone that has control over budget, you realize or you identify that talent that you're able to compensate it on time before the competition does. So that's something that you should definitely consider. And then the DAOs have this. So people that have a harder time either firing people or controlling budgets, they might say, oh, it's decentralized, so I cannot fire them. But the truth is that the moment you cut the incentives and the spice stops running, a lot of people will go away. So that's something to consider as well. It's like, where do you place incentives? How do you do it? How do you compensate people? Does it matter that they live in an expensive city? Potentially no. So at some point it's like everyone's kind of like fighting against the market. If someone in, I don't know, Argentina or I don't know, India or whatever, they can do, or they can provide as much value as you can for half the price, then yeah, potentially you should do something about it, because eventually you will be replaced. Which is the other thing. Is like, how do you create a DAO that's open and that you can show all the areas that need someone to coordinate. We have not solved that one yet. Lots of I don't know, one pagers or try to play with the communications, but yeah, I don't have a good answer yet. Hopefully I do solve that. But if anyone has a good idea to solve any of the problems that I've described, please reach out. I would love to talk to you. That's my plug.
I have a question on this one, because it's interesting how you stated the sort of right profile. You said you should be entrepreneurial, you should not care that much about titles, you need a high degree of autonomy. That's when you can thrive in a DAO. Sort of two questions on this. Do you think DAOs are incompatible with people who are raising a family, who typically need job security, who typically need, a credit line from a bank based on a work contract to afford an apartment or a house, something like this? Do you think that sort of filters out a lot of people who also want to, take responsibility for a family? Or would you say this is totally disconnected? There's no connection there?
I mean, we there are a lot of examples of people raising families and working for either DAOs or Web3 companies in some way or another. Usually when there's more risk in an industry, there's a prime to pay. So in that sense, you can be a bit more safe, at least in the short term. And then going back to the providing value, if you're less sure about the value that you can provide, or you can be easily replaceable, then of course it will be harder. But I don't think it's incompatible. I've seen a lot of, and not only developers, but a lot of people working for different DAOs that have full families raising children, and that's fine.
In your mind, do you think DAOs are sort of the future of work? They're sort of anticipating what the future of work is going to look like for most people on the planet, maybe also in face of, AI probably automating away a lot of, unskilled labor and that sort of thing. Is the only people remaining on the planet that will have job opportunities people of the kind that you described: high autonomy, high value, entrepreneurial, sort of self-employed, self-sustaining kinds of people, and DAOs sort of anticipate this future? Or do you think DAOs will sort of stay a niche type of employer in the market long term?
I mean, depends on the length of the timeline, but potentially DAOs are not only the future of work, but the future of life. So if a country of a given size or different values of people cannot agree on what to spend tax money on because they view, I don't know, their values are too different, potentially you could have DAOs organizing this. So you could be like, okay, we are for protecting this lake and we want everyone to have equal salary. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So we will create our own token and we'll make sure that we can do this by trading with other DAOs. So yeah, I'm not sure how this is going to look like. For sure, there's a lot to learn before we get there. I'm not even sure if this is possible, but as a feature of work, a DAO is not very different from just freelance work. So your question about is it easy to raise a family in a DAO, I think that the risk is relatively similar to doing freelance work for startups. Different startups have different risk profiles depending on the stage, depending on their funding, depending on their product market fit. There's a lot of things to consider, but in that term, a DAO should not ask a lot of risk unless, I guess, we're talking about regulatory risk. But I guess that's a whole other episode or a whole other podcast.
Before we close this podcast, I know we're already talking for an hour. I would love to talk a little bit about DAO tooling, just to get your sense on what you, as someone deep inside one of the biggest DAOs in the world, sort of how you look at it and the evolution and the expectations and requirements for DAO tooling in terms of how it needs to evolve. So I know that you've started this Toolhouse Rock series at MakerDAO, which is some sort of fun format to introduce DAO tooling to the maker community, sort of what's out there, what's currently possible, give feedback, evaluate the utility of it for the maker organization. So you are very much in touch with the DAO tooling. And you've mentioned more than once the big problem of reputation systems, that DAOs would need much more than, titles. Actually, you want reputation systems to judge the quality of people's work and their ability to execute. So more broadly, what is the state of the DAO tooling ecosystem today? Are you happy with it, or what's lacking? What do you think is needed for sort of Maker in its next iteration to thrive, but also generally the next generation of DAOs to be successful?
I have until 30 past if you want to keep going for a bit more, Florian. But yeah.
Perfect.
So I've been pitched a lot of different tools for DAOs, and most of them are not even addressing the right questions. Most of the DAO tools are tools for foundations with a lot of central power and a lot of control over what's happening, and it's a bit like a prepackaged Web2 tool, sometimes with some blockchain features, but they are ignoring all these new flavors that we're seeing, which is, okay, what happens if your budget is transparent for everyone? What happens if you have anons joining? What happens if you need different people to participate in different groups? So there's a lot of different possibilities or different things that we need to tackle, and as a DAO, it's a bit hard to do with tools that have not considered what a DAO is, because then you're just putting another problem that's just compounding. So if you cannot report to the community what you're doing within your tool, maybe this is too specific, but if you cannot report on the things that are happening, potentially that's not very useful for the DAO. I don't know. There's a lot of examples. I guess we could get into specific types of applications, but in general, most of the applications are not even addressing the problems that DAOs have.
I would love to talk about a few examples. A prime example that I'm of course concerned with in the context of Common Ground is Discord, which for some reason, understandable reasons probably, became the default communication software for a lot of teams working in Web3. It's not even just DAOs, but also DAOs. Where do you see, maybe let's focus on communication as a first example. Where do you see the shortcomings of software like Discord, and what do you think be needed for DAOs to actually function the way they are meant to be?
Yeah, maybe you're more of a pro in this than myself. For Discord, for example, I and you might call me a boomer, but I have a really hard time every time I try to add a new friend. So I put it in some search box that I found. It's like, oh, this is not the box. I click in some other, this is not the box. Then I click on add friend. It's like, okay, I think I found the box. It takes way too much energy to just found the person. Then there are problems of spam. I actually got an account banned for no reason. So I was like, okay, cool. I guess I'll create another one because support was not answering. So in terms of what's Discord lacking, not even for Web3, it's like, I think that there are a lot of problems with Discord, period. Then if you want to make it specific for Web3, I guess it depends on how you assign, for example, roles. How do you... And again, the role assigning is hard because do you give control to one person? Then potentially in Discord, the person that created the server has access to all the messages within that server, even if that's not part of the role. So if you tell your, I don't know, office manager, hey, can you set up the Discord? They're like, yeah, perfect, I'll do it, super fun. And someone's updating the roles. The moment that you don't want them to have access to the messages, you cannot do that. Yeah, then there are different things like I hope that with ZK we will get potentially more like anonymous channels where you can be like, okay, all the token holders, they can either choose a pseudonymous alias or even anonymous, where you can get different different ways of communicating. You can get feedback mechanisms that don't exist right now. I don't think that's even possible with Discord ever. Like their infrastructure is doesn't have the capabilities, and I don't think that they will ever think about this. Maybe in the very long future, but I don't see them considering these issues right now. Then there are other types of integrations, like if MKR holders want to bring someone on board and give them powers, how do they do that? Right now, the whole thing is very manual. If they want to revoke the access, how do you do that? So those are things that we should potentially consider when we're creating these tools. And yeah, hopefully Common Ground will reach there and yeah, fix all our problems, all our communication problems.
Beyond communication, where do you see the biggest need currently for innovation in DAO tooling? I mean, there are a bunch of projects that work on, for example, badge and reputation systems. That's something you mentioned. There are projects that work on governance, voting. There are projects that work on, I mean, you mentioned it, zero knowledge related things, anonymity. Where do you see the biggest gap at the moment? What is holding Maker back actively because there is not the right tool for it? Maybe like this.
I don't know if a tool would fix it, but more like a mechanism. And this is a bit more philosophical, but right now I'm trying to understand what's the trade-off between I do not want to have anything to do with these people because these are my values and these are not negotiable on one extreme. But of course, once you have that, you end up in an echo chamber where you're just with people that think like you and you think that the world is crazy as you are. And on the other extreme is like, let's accept everything. Everything goes. I don't care about anything. Someone could be, I don't know, murdering someone in front of me and yeah, whatever. It's their life. So kind of like the jungle law on the other extreme. So I'm trying to philosophically think how do we solve that? What's the right equilibrium? And once you do that, it's finding the consensus to make sure that your organization is diverse enough to be able to be resilient, but also that it doesn't compromise on its values. And once that you're trying to get this diversity and make sure that everyone's happy, we are usually giving this pizza example when we're trying to do consensus mechanisms. So, for example, you might have like a 15% of Italians in the group saying like, if you put pineapple in the pizza, we'll kill you. That's non-negotiable. While the other 60% or 70%, they're like, we do not care about pineapple. It's fine if we don't put it. But if you make everything come to a vote where it's where the result is very binary, it's like yes or no, potentially the pineapple would have won in that situation, but you're losing this 15% of your community. So I don't know if there's an easy tool or someone thinking about this. Again, reach out if you are. I would love to hear about you. But I think that's potentially a game changer as well, where you can kind of like express your views and be able to reach consensus in a way that's not that gameable, I guess. So that's a problem with game theory. And again, we can go deeper and have another full episode on that. But
yeah, we will for sure. It's interesting because I've been pitched recently, not really a project, but exactly a mechanism that could be relevant here. It's called value cards. And it's a way for communities to better understand who actually represents which values, which things are important for them. In my mind, I'm thinking about it like OkCupid, which is this dating app I've seen using in the past, where you have to answer these questionnaires, and then it sort of gives you, some, okay, you're whatever, conservative, or you're liberal, or you're sort of this, and then it matches you with people that have similar views on the world. And I feel that maybe that is some sort of element that could contribute to this. So I'll send you the links, and we'll put them in the description for others if they're interested to follow up on this.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think that the nice thing about the algorithm of OkCupid is that it had this, so it asked you like, what do you prefer, and then how negotiable your view was, if I remember correctly. So it's like, I will only take people that like dogs, and if someone says no dogs, like that's a deal breaker. So that would give you a little bit more of information to play with the algorithm. So yeah, super interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't prevent LARPing. So for that, we need some mechanism design. You need to state something on your views. I don't know, but yeah, it could be first attempt. Interesting, cool. Juan, that was incredibly interesting, and I think at least 2 more episodes are in store. We should make an episode on personal risk for people working in DAOs. I think that's becoming really, really important now with enforcement left and right, United States cracking down on crypto, and then another episode on I don't actually remember what it was, but we found at least one other topic to go into. And also I think, and this is probably a problem I have also as someone who's very deep inside this industry, that I didn't call you out on all the jargon that you've used, and I think a lot of listeners not as knowledgeable as us may not have understood everything. So we probably need an Eli 5 episode on what the heck are you guys even talking about here at some point. But for now, I want to say thank you. I've learned a lot. I enjoyed this episode. I love having conversations with you, frankly. It's just really chill, but also always interesting. So thank you very much for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Florian. If anyone wants to discuss anything further, please reach out. I would love to keep the discussion going.
Perfect. We'll put your contact in the description. Thank you.